So again, welcome to everybody. This is the Refusing to Pay for Repression webinar, and my name is Sam Koplinka-Loehr. I'm the new field organizer as well as outreach consultant with NWTRCC, National War Tax Resistance Coordinating Committee. It's great for me to be here. I've had a lot of fun getting to know everyone so far. It's been a real joy to get to start working with NWTRCC. And here I am in my home in North Philly. This is my beautiful artwork, graffiti artwork behind me. So thanks for coming into my home a little bit. I'm going to do an overview of what we're going to be doing today online. Let's see if I can get this one. Here we go. So we're going to start with introductions, and for everybody who's joining, whether by online or by phone, please say your name, where you live, and then one campaign for justice that you are excited about right now. And for those who are just arriving, we're just in the middle of introductions. So let's start on the West Coast for those who had to wake up early, and go ahead and say your name, where you live, and one ongoing campaign that either you're a part of or you're not a part of that you're excited about.
You want me to start? My name's Ann Barron. I live in San Diego. I'm the war tax counselor for this area for NWTRCC. And one campaign for justice, I guess because I just went to School of the Americas, I'm starting to make more connections with the people doing border work here. I would have to say that no more borders is kind of what I'm most excited about right now.
Cool. Great. Thanks, Ann. On the West Coast?
I'm Kristen. I'm from Portland, and I've just been interested in war tax resistance in general. I haven't been doing it, but I've talked to some people in the community that have been doing it, and have just been a general interest of mine and trying to figure out more about it and how to do it or how to facilitate it.
Great. And you say your name is Kristen?
Yeah.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, this is Bill Glassmore. I'm sorry. This is Bill Glassmore. I live in Corvallis, Oregon, and I'm just a war tax resistor, and going along day to day.
Great, thanks, Bill.
And I'm Kimma. I'm also in Portland, Oregon, and so I believe I am one of the contacts for war tax resistance counseling on the NWTRCC website. So, Kristen, you should get in touch with me. Yeah, that's been a passion of mine, and I've been doing it for about 28 years. So yeah, that's war tax resistance. I think is a really big part of my life.
Hey, this is Erica Weiland in Seattle, Washington. I'm an NWTRCC social media consultant, and I am excited about the Black Lives Matter related organizing that's going on in Seattle around the criminal justice system.
Cool. Great to have you with us, Erica. Other folks on the West Coast, we're doing introductions for those who just joined. We're doing your name, where you live, and one campaign for justice that you're excited about. Anybody else on the West Coast joining in? Great, so let's move to the Midwest. Anybody from the Midwest? And how about oh, go ahead. Yep.
I was going to say that's pretty telling, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone from the South?
This is Phineas Taylor from Hilton Head, South Carolina, and I am in a state of depression.
Yeah.
Will you say your name one more time?
Phineas Taylor.
Great, perfect. Thanks for joining us. Other folks from the South? And folks from the Northeast?
Well, John Stoner, Pennsylvania, mid-Pennsylvania, Lancaster County.
Great.
I am part of the 1040 for Peace group here, which is a war tax resistance group. I'm also a local counselor for Utrecht. And yeah, the thing I'm excited about is continuing our various, mainly local projects of education and awareness raising through events in this area around war spending and war tax resistance. That's my story.
Barry Friesen, Lancaster, PA, the Standing Rock pipeline witness.
I'm Henry Beck from Pottstown, Pennsylvania, and I'm interested in the Peace Tax Fund also.
Mary Lair from Ithaca, New York, and I'm excited about the Standing Rock witness also.
This is Mike Koplinka-Loehr from Ithaca, New York, and excited to reinvigorate our sanctuary city.
Thanks for joining, Mike.
Mike, somebody.
For those who don't know, Mike is my dad and Mary is my aunt. And they're both joining on. So thanks to the family members who are with us. Other folks in the Northeast?
Yeah, hi. This is Dave Miller in Rochester, New York. And I'm a volunteer, as is my wife, at the Gandhi Institute for Nonviolence. And we had the privilege of a couple of workshops delivered by Utrecht, and my wife and I started and then stopped some resistance, want to resume, but also want to contribute now instead of just waiting until we get to some certain perfect point to do it, which I know doesn't really exist. One of the things I'm involved in is the Correctional Association of New York, working to ban solitary confinement. So grateful to be with all you folks.
Great. Thanks for joining, Dave. Other folks in the Northeast? Sounds like some folks already just joined as well. So if you just are joining us, either by phone or online, we're doing introductions, your name, where you live, and one campaign for justice that you're excited about. Is there anybody who we didn't get to with introductions that wants to introduce themselves now? All right. So let's go ahead and get started. What we're going to be doing today is, okay. All right, here we go. So we just did introductions. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and the work that I've been doing. And then we're going to jump to Ann Barron in San Diego, who's joining us from the West Coast. And she's going to talk a little bit about the organizing that's happening, both in terms of war tax resistance and also the work that she's been doing with other organizations in the San Diego area. And the goal with that is really to highlight war tax resistors who are doing really important organizing. And it's not just, wow, Utrecht has a new organizer, but really everybody in the network is doing very critical and movement building work. And so wanting to really lift up the work that others are doing as well. And then we're going to have time to hear from you about your input for what you think the next year should be, both in terms of the work that you want to do in your community, and also what support from me would be useful in doing that work going forward. Then we're going to have time for some questions, and then we're going to close. And just again, for everybody who's joining us, if you're here by phone, the goal for the entire webinar is that you'll only really be missing photos, and that it's designed to be accessible by both phone and also by online. So if you want to see the photos later, it's being recorded and you can go back and watch the video later. And if at any point you feel like you're missing something, if I'm referencing something on the computer, please feel free to interrupt me and ask for more clarification, and I can explain what is the image. You know, it might be that I'm forgetting to explain the details there. So let's go ahead and get started. So a little bit about myself. Born up north in Nitassinan, which in Innu means our land. This is the northeast part of Canada in Labrador, and for those who are on the computer, there's a little baby photo of myself and my family. And here we are up in Davis Inlet, which is a small community where we were living at the time. This is the early 90s. And the Innu of Nitassinan had a long-standing campaign while we were up there. It was kind of in transition while we were there, but the campaign was against NATO there was an air base in Goose Bay for NATO, and it was on occupied Innu land. And the planes, the fighter jets, would fly very low over the traditional hunting land, and there would be these loud sonic booms from the planes doing their testing flights that would both scare away the caribou, and also it had, having low-flying planes going over at very high speeds with the sonic booms it was so shocking that oftentimes people would be forced onto the ground, quivering for minutes because of the low-flying planes. So there was a campaign against the NATO base, and a lot of the grandmothers led the campaign, including occupations of the NATO air base. So this is a Native community and a bunch of different Native communities that were working to fight the militarization of Native land, that is the stolen Native land. This is Ben Michel, who was involved in that struggle, and this quote, I think, really speaks to, for those who are joining by way of phone, this is a photo of Ben Michel, who was one of the organizers there. And I'm going to read out the quote that I have online here that I think really speaks to a spirit of resistance, and also thinking about how Native and non-Natives can work together. So he said, "I'm ready to go to jail, to take blows or die for our cause, because I believe in the struggle for the freedom of my people. I don't want your sympathy. I want your support, your strong and collective support against the oppression of your government. What we need is your resistance." So this quote spoke to me because it really asks for folks who are complicit with the oppressive structures, with the militarization of Innu land at the time, to take action in solidarity, not to pity, not to have sympathy, but really to take action of resistance. Resistance, the Innu resistance has continued to this day. For those who are on the phone, I'm showing a photo of Jongwish Panashwe, who is a grandmother that lived in the community of Sheshashi in Nitassinan. And every single year she would do what's called a mesh canoe, which is a long walk back into the bush where the Innu had lived before they were forced down into settlements, because traditionally they were nomadic. And so every single year she would do this walk, and the goal was really to maintain Innu identity and culture in the face of colonization and militarization. And she said just a few years ago, "Before I'm gone, I want to see some change. I want to help my people and teach the children. I don't want to see my children lose everything. I know we can't go back to how things were, but I don't want them to lose their Innu identity, culture, and life." So for the first few years of my life, my family was up in Davis Inlet. Moved to upstate New York. And Mary, I think you're on the phone, but this is a photo of you holding your sign, "I stopped paying for war, you can too." And for those who don't know, my aunt, Mary Loehr, was involved as the NWTRCC coordinator many years ago. And having her in my life was a huge force, a force for understanding both systems of oppression and also how many of us can take a role in resisting collectively those systems of oppression. Having Mary as a war tax resistor, and my parents for 2 years were also war tax resistors, as a teenager really got in my head about, that was my first real initiation into the idea of taxes, is you don't have to pay taxes. And so it was a pretty pivotal moment. And Mary also served jail time for direct actions as well, and those moments and those conversations with her and with other members of my family were hugely influential in thinking about resistance. As I grew up, I began to get involved in more and more campaigns, became an activist, both in high school and then later in college. I was involved with campaigns for divestment from arms manufacturers and fossil fuel companies, where we pressured the educational institutions to remove their money from these different corporations. I was then involved also with Native and non-Native coalitions. This is, for those who are on the phone, this is a photo from Elsipogtog, New Brunswick, which is kind of the northeast corner of Canada. And that campaign there was against fracking, hydraulic fracturing. And it was a Native and non-Native crew that came together to fight the companies that were trying to come in and extract natural gas, fracked gas, and also they were really working to protect the water every single day. This is a very powerful 2-week blockade of a fracking site. And people from across these different communities came together. This is a photo for folks who are on the phone. This is a photo of all of the youth coming out of the schools. They did a walkout from their schools to the encampment, and they joined people there, learning about the different issues and holding the space on this pretty big highway, refusing to let any cars go through, any of the company trucks go through. And we held the space for a number of weeks, and it ended with the military, the Canadian military, as well as the Royal Canadian Mounted Police raiding the encampment. And that really, in my mind, shifted things, really seeing the ways in which the military is used overseas, and having grown up in a community that was protesting war through war tax resistance and protests against the Iraq and Afghanistan war, and then also seeing how those same military forces are used against the people who are demanding the right to clean water, who are demanding the right for a healthy life, for a productive life, sustainable communities. So as this Native and non-Native coalition is fighting for those rights, the military is coming in and physically removing them, arresting them, shooting them in order to enact this corporate agenda. So really, that was where I really began to see the connections between military overseas and military here at home. After I moved to Philadelphia, where I live now, I've been involved with Black Lives Matter and the resistance against police terror here in the city. And so my campaigns over the years have really been quite broad. Also, I've been involved with the prisoner strike that happened at the beginning of September, where tens of thousands of prisoners across the United States refused to work. And they refused to work because the 13th Amendment of the Constitution does not guarantee them freedom from slavery. And so prisoners are required to work for oftentimes pennies when they really should be making a lot more, and they shouldn't be in prison, at least in my opinion. So I was involved with that prisoner strike at the beginning of September. So I want to talk just a little bit, I want to keep this tight, but I do want to talk a little bit about these new waves of resistance that we're seeing, often led by young people like myself, often led by people of color, by indigenous people, by queer people. And this is a photo for those who are on the phone. This is a photo of Standing Rock when the military and 6 different police agencies raided the encampment of the Standing Rock Lakota people who are protecting the water there from the Dakota Access Pipeline that would go underneath the river for 8 million people. So we're seeing these amazing new waves of resistance. Out at Standing Rock, we have over 500 tribes from around the globe that have expressed their solidarity with the water protectors and who have demanded an end to this toxic pipeline project. So it's really a huge coming together, very, very inspiring. We've also seen the rise of Black Lives Matter in the last 2 years, a huge movement across the globe, starting in Ferguson. And really it's been a call to action for everybody to recognize the police violence and genocide of Black and brown people by the cops that are increasingly militarized. I want to talk for just a second about while these new movements are coming up, we're also seeing the rise of increased repression. With the election, we now have a president-elect who is demanding for surveillance of Muslim communities, increased militarization of the police, and as folks who are online can see, this is a slide talking about how Donald Trump is really demanding an increase in the military budget to over $1 trillion. So while we have these amazing movements for justice, we also have the rise of intense, blatant repression with new elements of power, including the president, the House, the Senate, and perhaps the Supreme Court as well. So we have a need to be able to do more organizing than perhaps we've ever done before. We have a need to be able to protect our communities and work together like we perhaps have never done before. And we are starting to do that. This is an image, folks on the phone, this is an image in Tacoma, Washington, when environmental organizers and folks fighting deportation did an action together, really talking about the intersection of climate justice and immigrant rights. And here you can see it says climate justice means ending deportations. And they shut down an immigrant deportation facility. And so these are the types of intersections that organizers today are really showing. And the reason why this group of environmental organizers lifted up this action is because they felt like climate justice will mean that there are more refugees. Climate justice will mean that there are more immigrants. Climate justice means that as we see climate change really change dramatically the face of the earth, people are going to be forced to be moving from their homes, whether as a climate refugee or because of policies like NAFTA that created really oppressive economic structures. Well, they are forced to cross borders. So seeing those interconnections between our movements. This is when this photo is from when Black Lives Matter went out to Standing Rock, and they stood in solidarity with the folks at Standing Rock, recognizing that indigenous folks and black and brown folks, oftentimes there's many overlap thereof, need to be working together, really need to be seeing their shared struggle as one. And I want to kind of end this piece about how our movements can work together with looking at the Movement for Black Lives. And for folks who haven't read the Movement for Black Lives policy platform, I encourage you to go online and do so. It's a very powerful document. And what the policy platform really highlights that is, I think, of a particular importance to war tax resistors is this divestment from the Pentagon and divestment from war. And there's an entire section of the policy platform that is devoted to really considering how we need to be pulling money from the Pentagon and putting it into our communities. Sierra Taylor, who works with Code Pink as well as the Dream Defenders, said, "The Movement for Black Lives policy platform is considerably the most powerful anti-war document the United States has seen in a long time. With demands to end the war on black people and a call to divest from war and invest in our communities, there are clear paths to organize and coordinate our strategies." So definitely go check it out. The piece that I want to pull out is that it does demand a 50% cut immediately in military expenditures and a reallocation of those funds into our communities. And specifically that it calls on local communities to organize direct action in order to demand a cut in military spending and local reinvestment. And that's a piece where I feel like war tax resistors and the Movement for Black Lives really are just right on par with each other. They're right there with each other. We really need to be building that relationship stronger. And so I'm in Florida, for those who weren't at the NWTRC gathering, first off, it was a great gathering, and thanks to everybody who helped to make that happen. And one of the things that we talked about was the idea of collective redirection of tax dollars to Black-led organizing for Black liberation. And what folks really seemed excited about was this idea that local communities, whether it be Philadelphia, Seattle, what have you, could get together and as people refuse tax dollars each year, that money together could be pooled and put towards Black-led organizing. And there's a few reasons why we think this is, folks really latched onto this idea and think that it's really important. One of which is the movement for Black Lives and that clear agenda, and also because we're seeing, as I've talked about a little bit, both militarization overseas that's targeting Black and brown people, as well as militarization here in this country that is targeting Black and brown people. And the movement for Black Lives has really taken a strong stand against that militarization, demanding justice and demanding liberation from an oppressive system. So if you are interested in talking more about that, please let me know, or organizing in your community around that. There's a lot of work to be done. So definitely stay tuned on that front. And I want to end on a note of our relationships. So throughout the little pieces that I've shared of my story, there's been important relationships that have really galvanized my resistance and my ability to work with others in a collective movement for change. You know, I talked a little bit about Mary Loehr and the work that she was doing and how important that relationship was in shaping my understanding of tax resistance. Up in Elsipogtog, my friend Raven, who's, for those who are on the phone, you don't get to see this, but there's a photo of my friend Raven, who's leading this group of youth coming out of the schools to be at the protest site right in front of where the equipment for the hydraulic fracturing was. And our relationship shifted my perspective yet again. And then the last photo is Ronald Brooks down in Angola prison, who I work with and organize with. He's in solitary confinement down at Angola prison. And we are regularly on the phone, and that relationship yet again has shifted my perspective on state violence and the targeting of Black and brown folks through prisons, the police, the military, etc. So who are the relationships that we really have, and how are those shaping our own thoughts and our own actions in our work going forward? Down in Florida, I led a small workshop and asked folks how many people had a relationship that really galvanized their war tax resistance, that really led them to do tax resistance. And the majority of the folks in the room could identify a relationship in particular that was the key reason to them becoming war tax resistors. So in me thinking about the organizing for the coming year, I'm really thinking about what relationships are we building? What relationships with other movements are we building? What relationships with people in our lives are we building where war tax resistance gets to be a common conversation? Even in the 2 months that I've been a consultant for NWTRCC so far, a lot of the folks who are asking me about war tax resistance or who are starting to do W4 resistance or who want to learn more are people that I already know. They are people that I already know through different movements that I've been involved with. They're people that I already know through friends of friends who refer them to me. So it really is about who are the people that we already know who might be interested in this tactic going forward. And the last piece is that the historical moments that we think about in terms of tax resistance, whether it be the Vietnam War, whether it be Desert Storm, whether it be nuclear armaments that have brought different people into tax resistance, those historical moments are different now. And it very well could be the war that's happening in the streets with police shooting Black folks in the streets that galvanizes somebody to say, I don't want to pay anymore for a government that supports prisons, for a government that supports the police by giving them military-grade equipment. I don't want to pay anymore for wars overseas. And wars overseas might be one piece of many that really is galvanizing folks to see tax resistance as a tactic in their toolbox. So if folks, that's one piece that I want to talk with folks more about is what are the historical moments now and how can we really do the organizing work now to have tax resistance be a tool in the work that people are doing. So that's about our time for a little bit about me, and I'm glad that everybody's gotten a chance to hear a bit about my life and then also get to know me a little bit since we'll be working together. So I want to move now. Oh yeah, we talked a little. I missed this slide, but anyway, this is a slide for those on the phone about the collective redirection to Black-led organizing. And the basic idea, as I had said, is locally based collective redirection. The money that is refused is put into the Black-led organizing. and it will really be a local initiative that's supported by NWTRC. I'm now going to move over to Ann Barron in San Diego. Ann, thanks again for waking up so early to join us on the webinar. Really appreciate you being here with us, and you've got the floor to talk a little bit about the work that you're doing.
Thanks, Sam. I was taking lots of notes as you were talking and really appreciate you being with us. Really a fabulous summary of some of the work that's happening right now across the country. And so here in San Diego, I'm actually now with the Peace Resource Center. I wanted to give you a little background about that simply because we have at the Peace Resource Center a different take on the idea of resistance. This is coming out of probably a year of talking within ourselves, retreats, and with members. But the Peace Resource Center actually hosted a NWTRC meeting about maybe 3 years ago now, and has been tentatively putting its toe into the whole realm of war tax resistance. So I am going to be the first, I've been hired as a part-time consultant to do communications for the Peace Resource Center, and I'm coming in as a consultant because I do war tax resistance, and so I won't be paying any taxes. So this is kind of the Peace Resource Center's first, I don't want to call myself staff, but hiring someone who is a war tax resistant. They've been they are an affiliate and have been for a while. So we've been, could I see the next slide? I sent Sam some slides. I see most of us are on the phone. But what we've been focusing on right on the slide that's showing right now, that's what the Peace Resource Center looks like. It's a circular room within a circular cob building. And we are engaged in something we call prisms, which is looking at the intersectionality of all the different issues that many of our members and partner organizations are working on. So PRISM stands for poverty, race, immigration, sustainability, militarism, and spirituality. This here is a workshop. We've been doing lots and lots of workshops on what we call nonviolence, just exploring ways of being nonviolent. And we've been talking a lot about the words we use. And one of as we look at what's happening out in the wake of the elections, there's been so many protests here in San Diego. This idea of resistance, we want to really look at that as a concept. Perhaps resistance, by using force to counter force, may actually increase the force being used against us. So these are the discussions we're having, is that instead of resisting, perhaps there's a more proactive way of being in the movement rather than reacting, but creating. And a lot of the people now involved with the Peace Resource Center are coming out of the spiritual movement, so Buddhism, Zen, collaborative conversations, compassionate conversations, these ideas that we're not resisting people, we're not fighting against stuff, we're actually trying to work with each other to figure out how to move forward. And so this is a transition for me in my thinking, because I have come out of the anti-war movement, I've come out of the resistance movement, and this idea of sitting in a room with people who are very different and just trying to hear each other, I've actually found it very exciting. It's emotional, it's draining, and it's exciting. This idea of language, that you can sit in the same room, and even a room that's pretty homogenous, which you'll see this room as you're looking at these pictures, well, pretty homogenous, pretty much white, middle class, coming out of the middle class. So I just wanted to put that up there first. So our response to the elections has really been no response to the elections, if you understand what I'm saying. In fact, we never talk about Trump. We never talk about, because we feel that just gives him too much power. And we feel a lot of the Trump phenomena, I heard from a couple of us before today's meeting started that were so depressed. But the Trump phenomena, and really trying to understand how he was elected, is so important to the movement. So that's one of the things that I wanted to put out there. Next slide, please, because this is sort of helping me figure out how to talk. So what we have been doing here in San Diego, we got really, the war tax resistance movement got a huge jump start from what was happening at NWTRC when we decided to do the divest from the Pentagon, invest in people. So we had our first sort of collaborative days of war tax action in San Diego last, around tax day. Last April. And here we have a picture on board on the screen where we work also. There's something called the Overpass Light Brigade, which exists in many cities. And what they'll do is they'll show a light show at night that speaks to a message. And this one was No Taxes for War. And that was shown the night before April 15th. So that particular collaboration included the Peace Resource Center, Veterans for Peace, Overpass Light Brigade, and also brought to the table Food Not Bombs, the local working group there. We did a big war tax redirection where we were looking for people locally that we could redirect our taxes to. So I was the local war tax redirector. And then also we worked with the Southern California Alternative Tax Fund, and they also agreed when they did their so they give grants. They gave several grants to San Diego organizations, including the Peace Resource Center, Alternatives to Violence Project, and I think there was one more that they gave a grant to. So that particular kind of, it was exciting. It did start to establish some relationships, but it also made me quite aware of what are the stumbling blocks around war tax resistance. Sam had spoken about doing collective redirection of our war taxes to the Black Lives Movement. I reached out. I'm heavily involved in several organizations and several groups where there are a lot of black people and a lot of brown people. And I reached out to many of these groups. A lot of these groups are grassroots groups that got started because of very specific violence by police in their communities, and so they're responding to that. And my request to them that, you know, I would love to redirect my war taxes to you was met with silence. They were very, very wary of this whole idea of using war tax resistance. And I think part of that, in talking with some of them, they didn't even want to check from us. And I think part of that in talking to them was because they are definitely more vulnerable than white people are. So they're more likely to be harassed by IRS. That's their sense, that's their feeling. And so when I work in a garden that's run by the People's Produce Project, which is a nonprofit headed by an African-American woman, Diane Moss. And while she is looking for grant money, she did not want to reach out to this war tax resistance alternative fund because she wasn't comfortable with it. She wasn't sure if that would put her nonprofit status at risk. And so I think that this makes sense to me. And so again, it goes to building those relationships. It's going to take time to build those relationships and always be there, be consistent, be talking in small ways about war tax resistance, but not making it the main topic of conversation, but just, you know, bring it in gently at times. Where I'm getting, so the next slide. So that was our sort of first big collaborative work in San Diego, specifically around war tax resistance. And then the Peace Resource Center, mainly through me, we worked heavily with this other religious group. It's the Franciscan Peace Connection, which had been doing San Diego Peace Week for a couple of years before. So San Diego Peace Week comes out of the Campaign Nonviolence Week of Actions. They do, if you've ever, I don't know if many of you have been able to participate in those. And feel free to stop me if you have questions or if I'm not making sense. So we did that in September. We had a week of actions. Again, building those relationships with Veterans for Peace San Diego, Pax Christi, Overpass Light Brigade, Women Occupy San Diego, the Peace Resource Center. So those were people who were willing to have their, their name on the flyer, I guess, is kind of the way I think about it. But it was a great week of actions. We started out with a lot of peace trainings at the beginning of the week, and then we ended with an interfaith vigil at a local park. And that was quite powerful because while we had a circle among the three sort of Abraham religions, if you want to call them that, we also had an additional group of people that were Muslims and doing their prayers on a rug off to the side. And just to see the circle and then the Muslim prayer to the side was very powerful. A lot of people walking by and smiling at that. So that
you have about 2 minutes left in your section. Just as a heads
I'm sorry?
Just so you know, you have about 2 minutes left in your section, just as a heads up time.
Oh, okay. So if we go to the next slide then. So now what's happening is that Alfred Alango was shot in El Cajon at the end of September. And what we're now seeing is a military coup. We have a military coup happening in the east part of San Diego. And so next slide, please. And I'm bringing this up because we're starting to make connections with the communities who are directly hit by police violence and brutality. And so we are also reaching out to Uhuru, which is a white group that follows the African Socialist People's Campaign, and they're also party. They're also willing to do war tax resistance workshops, and we're going to be doing a co-led workshop in January. And again, the focus there is to have white people redirecting their taxes to black-owned businesses or nonprofits or, or movements. So here we're standing outside. There was an association of police chiefs, and we had a combined rally outside to contest the kind of the sort of SWAT team mentality, the militarization of the police. Next slide, please. So what I'm showing now is there is a tank sitting in the middle of a parking lot of a suburban strip mall in El Cajon, and this is a response to black people's right to freedom of assembly. So after Alfred was shot and killed, there started a makeshift vigil, and people were gathering every night to mourn and to protest. These are all peaceful protests. It's happening in a very white, sort of even, can I say, supremacist neighborhood. And so what happened was police came in increasingly more and more violent, and they came in on one day, on October 18th, and it was like, it was martial law in El Cajon. There was no, you have no rights to democracy at all. People were, I kind of, it's just, I was there, it was very emotional, it was terrifying, and I felt like I was in the middle of the war zone and got a small feeling of what black people must experience here in El Cajon and Santee. So this attack on people's rights, on this democratic right to freedom of assembly, happened the evening of the morning where there was a lawsuit presented. There was a lawsuit filed against the police and sheriff department in East County of San Diego. And so what happened was the police basically said, up yours, to the community, and rolled in with tanks, military gear. They were running around in flak jackets, heavy assault riflery, and in groups of 3, and taking down mainly black men in the crowd. They would just target them, rush them, take them down to the ground. We saw this happen again in the protests after Trump was selected. And again, it was mainly people who were black or brown who were selected and targeted by the FBI and the police and they came in and took them down without any warning. So we have a couple of people who are severely injured. So now what we're going to be doing as part of our outreach and part of our solidarity is looking to build a bail fund, because we know as the protests continue, and what we've heard from people is that there is no intention to stop the protests. We know that our brothers and sisters are going to be targeted, and so we need to be ready with bail support and also to support them financially, because when you get arrested, we're learning throughout the whole bail system, it's just another attack on poor people. So that's kind of where we are now. Okay. So that's the People's Produce Project. That's another organization I work with. I'm actually an urban farmer, and I grow food, and then we sell it at this night market. So that's what I do for my day job.
Great. Thank you so much, Anne. It's always important to be hearing about all the work that's happening in all these different communities that we're a part of. So thank you for speaking to all the work happening in San Diego. So this brings us, you've heard a little bit about myself, heard a little bit about what Anne's doing in San Diego, and want to now really have a chance for all of you to be who are on the webinar and also joining in by way of phone to talk about the work that you want to see happen with war tax resistance in the coming year. So what we'll probably do is there are 3 questions. I'll repeat them for folks who aren't online. And we'll go around just like we did in the introductions and give you a chance to either speak to one of the questions or all 3 of the questions. And there's also no obligation to speak if you don't want to. You can send me your responses later or give me a call on my phone at any time. So maybe not 3 a.m., but just about any time. So the 3 questions are: what else do you want to see happen with war tax resistance in the coming year? What are you doing in your area to make that happen? That could also be what do you want to do in your area to make that happen? And what support would be useful for you to build a stronger and more connected movement going forward? So again, what do you want to see happen in the next year with tax resistance? What are you going to do, or what are you doing to make that happen? And what support would be useful to you with your work around war tax resistance? So let's start with folks on the West Coast, and if there's anybody who has some thoughts on that front, this is a great time to really kind of build off each other and have a little bit of a discussion to hear what work people are doing in their area and what support would really be useful for them going forward. So anybody on the West Coast who wants to jump in, please go ahead.
Okay, I'll jump in. So what I would love to see happen is that the National NWTRC office starts making those relationships with the national offices of the groups that we're involved with locally. So Veterans for Peace, for instance, San Diego, while they've endorsed the idea of doing some education around war tax resistance, they've really been hesitant to do so because they work very closely with their national offices, and a lot of their local actions come out of their national office. So if we were to reach out, if Sam or anybody were to reach out to the National Office of Veterans for Peace to talk about war tax resistance within the context of divestment, within the context of decreasing militarization, that would be so helpful. And I'm also thinking of the League of Women Voters. I'm trying to just the Peace Resource Network that exists. So, for instance, we're not really Peace Resource Centers, not really affiliated with any particular network per se, but we know there's a ton of Peace Resource Centers out there.
Great. If you see me looking down, it's just because I'm taking some notes here while people are talking. Thanks, Anne. Other folks on the West Coast who got up early to be with us? Any thoughts?
Well, this is Kimma, and I would say the Portland group hasn't been very active lately, and we're struggling with how to get more involved with the community, and so yeah, we're just looking for more ideas to reach out to people, and like we used to have do counseling vortex resistance, presentations, and maybe 1 or 2 people would show up, sometimes 3, but sometimes none.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just stopped because it felt like sort of a waste of time when we get there and nobody shows up.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it just kind of petered out. We haven't been doing a lot as far as outreach into the community just because there doesn't seem to be a lot of interest, but at this point there might be more.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
But we need some ideas and some help to get going again.
Great. Well, I would love to get on the phone. Maybe we can make a time to talk, to do a little bit of brainstorming, if that's useful.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Other folks on the West Coast?
I had an idea as Kemma was talking.
Okay.
This is Ann. One of the things I think we need to be doing is showing up at everyone's movements, everyone's events, and it would be great if we had T-shirts that said something like "Ask me," how to, not like ask me about war tax resistance, but ask me how to stop paying for war or something like that. And then we're visible, we're in the community, we're wearing T-shirts, we're out and get those conversations started. But really not doing it to direct people to war tax resistance. I just don't want to take over their movement with our message, I guess. I'm trying to figure out the way of doing that.
Right. I wore a button that said something like, ask me about war tax resistance or not paying for war or something like that, and I lost the button. But I wore it for several years out everywhere. I wore it everywhere, and maybe 3 people ever asked me.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if a T-shirt would be more obvious, but for somebody to actually ask, I don't know. But that's been my experience. I wore that pin every day for years, and only a handful of people ever mentioned it.
Yeah.
That was my experience.
All right, let's open it up to folks in other areas as well. Anybody who wants to respond to any of the questions about what you want to see happen in the coming year, or what support and what work are you hoping for?
This is Bill Glassmeyer in Corvallis, Oregon. I pretty much, I kind of agree with what Ann and Kimma said. I think that what would be most helpful for me is some new direction for tax resistance relative, directed toward what Sam was saying, or this era's historical issues. Over the years, I've asked friends to get involved in war tax resistance, and they basically said no. I'm afraid.
Mm-hmm.
So my perspective on this is that we need to identify the issues which other folks care about a lot, and then try to figure out how to make tax resistance or war tax resistance, I'm not sure whether you're going to say tax resistance or war tax resistance, relevant to those issues. And having that conversation is what I hope that this organizing effort can lead to.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, that's a critical point, really, about, I think that ties right in with what Ann and Kim were saying about how do we really build connections with other movements. We don't take over their space, but really draw the connections and make it relevant, make tax resistance and war tax resistance really relevant. And there are so many overlaps that I think you're right. There's a lot of work to be done, really kind of describing and fleshing out all the details around how do we really connect there in those overlaps. Other folks, the South or the Northeast?
Yeah, John Stoner in Akron, Pennsylvania. I really want to affirm the connection with Black Lives Matter. Really glad to learn about the platform statements and position of Black Lives Matter, linking Pentagon spending and economic issues. So I think this has a lot of fruitful possibilities.
Great. And for those who are interested, in May, the NWTRC national meeting is going to be in St. Louis, Missouri, which is right near Ferguson. And so there's a lot, right now we're in the planning stages, but there's a lot of discussion about how can we do some joint trainings and how can we really take a strong stand for Black Lives Matter while we're out there at kind of the birthplace that, following the murder of Michael Brown in the streets by the Ferguson police. There's a lot of work that we can do to really say, we are standing up for Black Lives Matter, and how can we have this national gathering highlight a lot of these interconnections. So if you're interested in being involved with the planning, or if you want to come to St. Louis in May, please, mark your calendars. I think it'll be a great gathering. Other folks, South and Northeast, about your thoughts on what would be good in the coming year? This is also a chance, for something just as simple as, please come to Rochester, and do a presentation, or would love to get on the phone and talk more. This is an opportunity to really just provide your input. And you can also shoot me an email afterwards. Great, we have a chat comment here, and it says, this is from folks. Let's see. So Anne said, reaching out nationally to League of Women Voters, Veterans for Peace, NAACP, in order to build those relationships on a national level. And folks in Ithaca, Mike and Carrie, said, Lansing, New York, said, very informative webinar, great photos. I'd like to hear more personal stories about resistors, what they did, and how they did it. For folks who are interested in hearing those stories, on the NWTRC website, there's lots of pages on people's personal stories, and there's also a documentary as well that you can check out online.
So I'm wondering if there's any interest among people here or among NWTRC to, again, try to do some sort of cross the country day of tax action that's coordinated and that we could send out press releases. So aiming for, again, April 15th, but doing stuff before then. The best time to start doing stuff around war tax resistance is when people start thinking about their taxes. So looking at January and February. But if we could hold like the similar type of events, like maybe we'll be outside IRS office offering war tax counseling, but do it around the country. Something like that, that I think would be really good.
Cool. So just to speak about what we're going to be doing here in Philadelphia, Ari Rosenberg and myself were working on a workshop along with a few other organizations in the city, specifically about the connection between war tax resistance and other movements. And that is going to be the end of January here in Philly. And then in the months leading up to Tax Day, we're going to do another kind of workshop more specifically on the 101 of tax resistance. And hopefully from that first workshop, we'll get some renewed interest. And we'll see, how much interest there actually is. And then our Tax Day here, we're still kind of finalizing the details, but we're hoping that it's going to be a lot of the organizations, the Black-led organizations in the city have called for white folks specifically to give money to them. And so we're hoping that we can get a lot of white folks doing tax resistance, and also Black and brown folks doing tax resistance if they are interested in redirecting it to movements that are Black and brown led as well. You know, and again, as you said, Anne, there are differences in risks for white folks and for Black and brown folks and people of color who are doing tax resistance, because it is an illegal act, and those who, depending on our identities, we face different levels of repression from these state institutions. So there's more conversations to be had there, but that's kind of our plan in terms of the collective redirection portions. We have yet to figure out some of the details around the actual tax day actions, but would love to brainstorm with you and with others about how we could do a coordinated message between different cities and communities.
Sam, this is Barry in Lancaster. I really appreciate the emphasis of this call on intersectionality. I wonder if you have a comment in response to the earlier comment, whether this emphasis on intersectionality is causing you to, are we changing language from war tax to just tax resistance? Do you find yourself asking that question?
Great.
And what's your response been?
Yeah. Thanks. That's a great question. That actually brings us to kind of, maybe we can broaden it up to both people's input around the coming year and also just open questions for myself and other folks on the call. So I would say that in the work that I have been doing, I have started shifting it to tax resistance and talking about war more broadly, war overseas and the wars in our streets at home. And I think that for some folks who have been doing war tax resistance for a long time, this is a little bit of a sticking issue, and that, you know, for myself and many folks in my generation, the military budget is one piece of a much bigger puzzle of the militarization of our communities, of brothers and sisters being shot in the streets, of the invasion of native lands. So there's of the growth of prisons. And so for myself, I define war broadly. I define it as the war on our communities and the war on our communities globally. And so I see war tax resistance as all of those pieces. But when I'm talking with others in terms of making war tax resistance relevant, sometimes I do drop the war and I talk about how tax resistance might be useful for them if they're resisting prisons as a potential tactic. And then we can have the conversations about all the other forms of oppression, including, you know, over $500 billion every single year going to wars overseas. So that's my perspective on it, is that it kind of depends on the community that I'm a part of, or the action that I'm a part of. And it seems like some folks are more resonant, like war tax resistance is more resonant in those communities, and other communities talking about other issues that maybe aren't typically seen of as war is more resonant and might get them more interested in the resources that NWTRC has to offer. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
This is Bill Glessmar again. I am kind of neutral on that issue, but if you don't say war tax resistance, then you're changing NWTRC's message. I mean, significantly. That's a significant issue and one to think about. I'm not neutral, not opposed or for. Just it is a new way of conceptualizing things.
Right. Yeah, and I would just say this is for the work that I have been doing. This is not, you know, NWTRC as a whole. This is, you know, myself in terms of what I've found useful in talking about war tax resistance in different spaces.
So in conversations I've been having here, I'm actually now on the NAACP Executive Committee for San Diego, and really it's interesting that there's a lot of respect for the military, especially in the more established middle-class African-American communities, and for Latino too, because that's how they were able to get access to the middle-class lifestyle. It's because through military hiring. Mm-hmm. But there's also a lot of anger, like huge amounts of anger now to the police. Mm-hmm. So where war tax resistance may not resonate in some places. Tax redirection may resonate because this idea, as we link the police militarization, it's not just wars abroad, it's wars at home.
Right.
These are wars at home. And so a lot of people I talk to understand that message, that we have a war at home against many different communities.
Right.
So I find using the term war tax redirection and then war including not just the Pentagon, but all aspects of this militarized, because we have militarized schools now here in San Diego, we have the police, and it's so obvious now that the police have complete power and people don't.
Right. Yep. I'm realizing that perhaps folks have been muted if they're joining by way of online or by way of the phone. So hopefully, if you're muted and you want to speak, make sure that you're unmuting yourself either on your phone or on your computer. Anybody else have questions or thoughts around the coming year's organizing?
John Stoner again in Pennsylvania. I just think that one of the things that the country is going to see in consequence of this federal election is that what Americans have been willing to do to people overseas, there will more and more will discover people who will do that to people overseas will also do it to people here. Of course, blacks and Latinos and Indians, Native Americans have known that all along, but it comes forth in a more dramatic evidence, I think, now and in the days ahead.
Great. Looks like we have another. Ruth here is saying, as to Veterans for Peace, the national office in St. Louis, so we can plan to work them into our weekend program if possible come May. We've had a relationship over the years, but that will be a good place to renew it. Thanks for the webinar, Sam. Thanks, Ruth, for joining us as well. It's easier for you to type your comments in. You can in the little chat box if you're joining by way of the webinar. So we're just at about our hour and 15 that we had allotted for the webinar. Do folks have other questions or thoughts before we close that they want to share?
Sam, this is Bill Glassmeyer again. Do you want to say anything about the organizing committee that was set up at the Florida gathering?
Yeah, and actually, since it was your idea, Bill, if you want to say a few words, it'd be great to hear from you on that.
Well, I suggested the idea, and Sam agreed to convene it, I believe.
Yep.
What it is, what I see it as trying to do is pretty much what Ann suggested, outreach to other national groups which could be interested in tax resistance. Ann mentioned League of Women Voters and one other Ann? Anyway, but I was thinking more of Black Lives Matter, maybe the Green Party, but you know, it's up in the air. Anyway, this committee is going to be working on that kind of outreach nationally about tax resistance, trying to figure out how to do it effectively, I think.
Yep. And if you're interested in joining that committee, please, give me a call, send me an email, and I'll be convening that committee within the next 2 weeks. We have yet to find an exact time, but we'll either do a conference call or a webinar, depending on what works best for people. So that's kind of an ongoing project that people can plug in with. And we already see that Ann says that she's interested. So, hey, another person.
So I know we're wrapping up, but I did want to put a thought out there. So one of the things that trying to understand how our U.S. election system works, I think, is so crucial. A lot of people were very upset, of course, after what happened on Tuesday. And what we're seeing is that this is come after the result of years of voter suppression, electoral fraud, that we don't have a democracy. And I think it's so important for people to understand this, and they don't understand this. A lot of the Democrats don't understand how only 25% of the people eligible to vote were able to select a president, and we don't even get to the electoral. Everyone's focusing on electoral college right now. So we've been talking within the Peace Resource Center about setting up, we're going to call ourselves democracy protectors. You know, this idea, love this idea coming out of Standing Rock that we're protecting, that we're not protesting, but protecting. And then really trying to explain to people and show just how our election system is not democratic. It's not even a representative electoral system, even though it's supposed to be. And so one of the suggestions, one of our local organizations showed the movie, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, and it would be so cool if different NWTRC groups could host that in their communities. It's really easy to get. It's by Greg Palast, and it explains just how this present electoral campaign was rigged. And then, of course, we could talk about the 2000, all the elections are rigged on the national level. But it's just important to have people understand that, I think.
Yep. Great. Thanks, Ann. Other final thoughts? All right. Well, I will, for the folks in Lansing, Mike and Carrie, who are wanting stories, I will post a link to the NWTRC website that has a lot of those stories, so that you can check those out if you're interested. And if you any other follow-up pieces that you want additional information or want to like get involved with the ongoing outreach committee, please do drop me a line. Here's my contact information. Phone number is 607-592-7650, and my email address is organizer@newtric.org. So looking forward to hearing from you going forward, and there's definitely some follow-up to do in terms of ongoing conversation. So I'm looking forward to working with all of you over the coming year. Thanks again, and the webinar will be available for those who are interested online, and I'll send out the link to the video within the next few days. So thanks again for joining on, and hope to see you all soon.
Thank you,
Sam.
Sam.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Sam.
Thanks, Sam.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.